Hi everyone, this is a short introduction to a playlist I've put together about energy issues in Japan. I had the pleasure of traveling in Japan in January and February of this year. I'm wearing this hat because I want to provide continuity between the playlist and this little introduction. You'll see me wearing the hat in some other videos in this playlist. I had the pleasure of traveling around Japan, as I mentioned, to check out a lot of stuff about the geography of Japan. One of the things I looked at was energy use, energy generation, and the alternatives for energy generation that Japan was experimenting with in terms of its resources and how to best manage its energy issues. The context for Japan's current energy situation started in 2011 when a massive earthquake off the coast of Japan, off the east coast of Japan. Here, let me move my head out of the way. Uh, Here's Japan. You can see it's a chain of islands. You can see a deep trench here from the subduction of the Pacific plate underneath the continental plate of which Japan is part of. And the eastern coast here of the northern island of Honshu. So Honshu is the biggest island of Japan. This eastern coast of the northern part is part of Tohoku. Tohoku is the whole northern region. And this eastern coast had a big offshore undersea earthquake in 2011. It's one of the greatest earthquakes ever recorded in Japan. And it shook the earth dramatically, as earthquakes do. So there was a lot of damage. A lot of buildings were collapsed or damaged because of that earthquake. But not just that, the seafloor here buckled enough that it sent a massive wave out, and that wave formed a tsunami that then inundated a lot of the coastline from Iwate up here all the way down through Sendai and even further south. Now, why that matters is because right along this coastline in Fukushima Prefecture is landed right on it here, a nuclear power plant known as Fukushima Daiichi. The earthquake cut power, and then the tsunami destroyed backup power to the nuclear power plant, and so they couldn't control the cooling of the reactor cores, so they overheated and they had a partial meltdown and three separate meltdown events with hydrogen gas being released and exploding that then sent a radioactive plume across a lot of the area downwind, which was to the northwest, more or less, of this area. So, because of the meltdown and the resultant closure of this whole region because it was radioactive, they evacuated everybody within about I think a 30-kilometer radius at first, and they might have even expanded it a little bit outside of that at first. Because of the public's concern over the risk posed by nuclear power, the Japanese energy companies shut down all nuclear power reactors in the country, and nuclear power had been the primary energy source in Japan until then. So, what we're seeing is an energy crisis all of a sudden, and the focus of my playlist is about the possible solutions that Japan has been exploring to energy crisis. By the way, you can see some of the possible, there's a couple different things you can observe about this on Google Maps. One thing you can see right away is the massive efforts that Japan has gone to mitigate the impacts of this fallout. You can see these big green tarp covered mounds that are filling these entire city blocks. These are piles of nuclear waste contaminated, fallout contaminated soil that has been scraped off every field and open space in the fallout zone and then moved by trucks to these staging areas, eventually to be removed and disposed of. Where they're going to dispose of it is a different question that we don't have time for right now, but it's an interesting public debate that Japan is dealing with right now. Obviously, they don't want to leave it where it was, but then where they can put it that's safe is a tough question. You can see the fields were just fields until they, and actually, by the way, these fields are the fields post-evacuation post-tsunami. So it was just a field, but now in this photo, it's a field with a car inexplicably stuck in the middle of it. There's a field here with some debris from a destroyed building in the middle of it. So these satellite images are really interesting time capsules that way. If you zoom in, here we go. Here's some of these bags when they were first deposited, when the cleanup first started happening. So you get an idea about the massive scale of the recovery operation here and the massive expense that it entails. And then you can also get a little glimpse from these satellite images of some of the energy futures that Japan is planning or considering. If we look around, here we go. You can see that these areas that were once empty fields are now massive solar panel arrays. And you might see some solar panels here or there on a house or maybe even on an office building, but these solar installations really dwarf the scale of what we see in places like Western Washington or even a lot of places in California. These are really massive, massive solar installations. So in terms of the trip we're about to go on through a series of short videos in a playlist, we're going to start out here right in the fallout zone. There's actually a red zone. Some people call it the red zone. Some people call it the hot zone or exclusion zone. The Japanese term for it is very delicate. It's the difficult to return zone, meaning they don't expect anyone to return there anytime soon. But that's what they call it. Anyway, the I'm mirrored. That's funny. I don't, you know what? You don't need to see me. You can just look at this. So we start out by driving through this zone. You're allowed to drive through it. You're not allowed to stop. You're not allowed to get out of your car. You're not allowed to walk around, but there is a highway through. What I've read, and I researched it carefully before I drove through it, is that driving through, even at a slow pace, you're getting less radiation than you might if you were getting an X-ray. And so the exposure is pretty minimal for just driving through. You wouldn't want to live there, and as a matter of fact, I don't think anyone's going to live there for a long time. So the first couple playlist videos are of us driving through this area. It's quite fascinating. And then we stop in Namie, and then we go on to look at a number of different power solutions or power possibilities along the west coast of Japan over here, up into Akita Prefecture and up towards Morioka, up in the northernmost part of the main island of Japan. That's all I have to say to introduce this. I hope you find it interesting and a little sobering and educational.